I'll start so long by saying thank you to Adele. Those were very kind words. I really appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Lights, camera, and action on me. I'm super pale. I reflect a lot. Be careful. You may need sunglasses. But firstly, thank you everybody for coming. It's really exciting to see so many faces. Also, it's home time. It's 5 o'clock. That's when you're meant to clock off. So I really appreciate you coming to this. So I'm going to get right in. This is a topic that has unfortunately become something that I am very much into elaborating on. So disinformation. I just want to point out the fire pool in the corner there. Does anyone remember Jacob Zuma's fire pool? Exactly. So we're talking stupid, flippant disinformation and we'll see murders. So let's dive in. So I get confused often between misinformation and disinformation, and I just want to run through that quickly. Misinformation is basically inaccurate information. It's not necessarily intentional, and I think the best way to explain it to you is I'm not a maths person. If I put an extra zero in a figure in a story and say 50,000 instead of 500,000, my apologies, that's misinformation. Disinformation, however, is intentionally warped information. It is malicious. And this is where words can be weaponized, communication can be weaponized, and that's where it's really dangerous. So I just want to show you two of these articles from IOL. I actually used to work there a very long time ago, but be that as it may, things happen, things changed. And over here we have an image of Branko of Daily Maverick, or previously our editor, and says, "Smoke and mirrors why Daily Maverick's Branko," cannot say his surname, please don't tell on me, Nicole, is a liar and a thief. They later apologized, as you can see. And I think this is a classic case of disinformation, okay? And just for the record, and I've put it there in red, and for job keeping purposes, I want to make it very clear that Branko is not a liar, and I do not think he's a thief. So that would fit into what we believe is disinformation. So we know South Africa's history is steeped in disinformation, right? I would go so far as to argue, and you'll see why, that our background or the history of South Africa that we know isn't necessarily what we think it is. What's been sold to us and what we've been told isn't truth. So we had the Rainbow Nation, and make of that what you will. Some people I've spoken to, some people previously in the police service, have actually questioned where Rainbow Nation comes from. Is that not a PR campaign? Were we not sold a gimmick? And if we look at it now, it feels like we were. So we went from the Rainbow Nation, sort of segued into state capture, which we will go into. And then we are now in the new-ish dawn. We're in the new dawn. I don't think we've severed ourselves from state capture, and you'll see why as I go further. So this is a dirty, this for me is true organized crime. It is dirty, it is filthy, and what makes it terrifying is that you can't add parameters to it because you cannot really see it. So you can see, or an assassin, a killer can be convicted. A character assassin, though, is not someone that you can easily identify. It's not someone, we're not going to have a smear campaign and the character assassin like, "Hey, y'all, I just smeared you." We don't get that. So, sorry, my personality is slipping out. Sorry. But so the South African Revenue Service, for me, and I'm sure we'll all agree that it's the poster child of state capture in South Africa. What happened there is, it's so gross and disgusting. Disinformation gutted the Revenue Service. People's lives were ruined, and in ways that we will never actually know. We're talking relationships, families breaking apart, people not able to cope on their own, and of course, being sucked dry of money because of litigation that is driven by nefarious people and ugly means. Okay, we know that crime intelligence was hollowed out. We've got Richard Mgluli our former head of crime intelligence, who is now a convict. Not only is he a convict, he is now standing trial on criminal charges. And that was the head of crime intelligence. So we know crime intelligence, the South African police service, was deeply impacted, almost imploded by state capture. And the result of that is that criminals walk free because of greed-driven sabotage to protect the criminals. And here's what makes it scary. It's coming from within the state. A lot of it is manufactured in the state. So it's very difficult to see what is put to us as truth versus what is put to us as purported truth. And that's what makes my job super difficult. It's such a messy terrain, and it's dangerous. Like, you will, if you've come to some of my other talks, I don't say that I feel I'm in danger. This is where I feel extremely exposed and almost threatened in a sense. So I just want to briefly touch on our poster child of state capture, which is recovering, the South African Revenue Service. On the top here, we've got two headlines from the Sunday Times that ran several years ago, 2014. So the one is SARS bugged Zuma. The other one is Taxman's rogue unit ran brothel. Okay, now that is, we know now, these were manufactured, these were planted stories intentionally to implode SARS. And then you'll see, not to blow Daily Maverick's horn, but there was a story behind the headlines in an era of state capture. And I just wanted to show you from two inside perspectives from SARS. So on the one side, we've got SARS, the former SARS spokesperson, Adrian Lakay. He explained this exceptionally well. Certain individuals compile dossiers, files, and information which purport to uncover corruption, but are in fact a concoction of some fact and some fiction. Okay? So what he's effectively saying is that people who come across as whistleblowers are actually the crooks here. They are the ones planting information with us. So whistleblowers aren't necessarily whistleblowers. Now, how do we figure that out? That's what we have to deal with every single sort of investigative piece and other stories, as you'll see now. And this is from former SARS executive Johan van Lochrenberg, and he said it very well here. The entire nation was fooled. The entire saga was a complete and deliberate sham, fed by many with overlapping nefarious motives and agendas. So we're not talking like, when I say Stratcom, we think, oh, like a little bit of misinformation, a little bit of disinformation. The entire country was fooled for a little bit. We are talking masses of people. It's almost like brainwashing or a cult. You're getting huge masses of people believing something and not seeing truth. And where does that leave us? We've seen the result of this. We've seen what's happened with Eskom, power cuts, etc. So as I was typing, or as I was polishing this presentation, things kept happening. And I'm not going to come here as a journalist and not address these things. So last week, when I was doing my organized crime on our doorstep presentation, this raid on JP Smith's office was happening. So he is the mayoral committee member for safety and security, and his office, along with Xanthia Limburg, who's the mayoral committee member for energy for the city of Cape Town, his office was raided, their offices were raided. Now, here's where it gets, and again, it's scary. It's really scary, and it's unappetizing for us as residents in Cape Town. We should not let this be. What JP Smith has said in reaction to the raid is that a political hit squad has been created or crafted to smear his character. Okay, so I've highlighted a little of his statement that he posted on Facebook. He also said that it appears that ANC, people in the ANC, politicians, are working with possibly former and current members of the police service. Okay, so either way we look at it, one main scenario is that JP Smith is the target of a very ugly, very damaging smear campaign. The second scenario is that he's lying. So neither scenario is good. Okay, so, and we'll see how it unfolds. This isn't to say he's guilty or not guilty, but it is deeply concerning for us. We are in a province where gang violence is the worst in South Africa. We have the highest gang murder rate, and where are police officers now focused? On politicians. So, now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, but how information peddling and smear campaigns actually work. So I'm not an information peddler or a smear campaigner, but from the outside, you can somehow see over like a long, long time as a journalist, you can spot the sort of hallmarks. So here we have George Darmanovich. He was known as the Butcher. He was based in Johannesburg. Okay, he was known as the Butcher because the tale goes along the lines of his father used to run a butchery in Johannesburg and he was taught how to cut meat. But he also, in his later years, accrued a variety of firearms, and that added to the Butcher nickname. So he was actually a South African state security contract worker. So he did contract work for the State Security Agency. But if you read Anton Harber's book, so for the record, you'll find out a lot of creepy details about George Darmanovich. So he used to base himself in a restaurant in Joburg and sort of schmooze with cops, other intel agents, we assume, people of influence, crime intelligence officers, police officers, fancy schmancy business people, okay? And that's how he created a web of influence. And sometimes, according to Anton Harber's book, you'd have George Darmanovich sitting with someone, and then he'd have someone at another table seeing him sitting with someone. And that person's like, oh, he's sitting with, let's say, a top-ranking police officer. And that's how he grew his web. So what he did is what most information peddlers do. They combine fact and falsehood, so fact and fiction. So you can't tell the one from the other easily. So for example, there's a murder. That is fact. They embellish around that. Oh, but I saw so-and-so there, and so-and-so saw so-and-so there, when that didn't happen. So he also used closed loop systems. So, and this, again, this is terrifying for me as a journalist. So what information peddlers do is that they tell you something, okay? They tell that to me as a journalist, full well knowing, as a decent journalist, I'm going to go check externally of this person, but they've already contacted the person. They preempt our contact, and that person will confirm the lie. And it could go to 3 or 4 people. So they close the loop. They solidify the lie. George Darmanovich was assassinated in Serbia in 2018. So the weird thing about him is that around 2017, 2018, someone who's also mentioned in Anton Harber's book told me that George Darmanovich wants to chat to you. It was about nightclub security in Cape Town. I felt uncomfortable about what was happening with nightclub security in Cape Town. There were factions allegedly fighting each other. There were shootings, a lot of shootings, and I didn't contact him. And then it was shortly after that that I heard he'd been murdered in Serbia. So agents are used to peddle propaganda. We know this. In some cases, the media is complicit. So in some cases, journalists may actually know what they're doing. They may know they're spreading propaganda, okay, and they're promoting smear campaigns. And that's what makes it difficult to be in journalism, because you sometimes paint it with the same brush and you're fighting to sort of push against it. Now, on the flip side of all that, journalists looking into I'm just going to say it, but yucky politics and organized crime and scary, creepy things. Once you start unraveling that, you become the target of the smear. And so it goes. So I'm going to punt Daily Maverick's YouTube channel here. We've got a great YouTube channel. The video team at Daily Maverick does absolutely astounding work, and there's a documentary on there. Some of you may have watched it. It's section 16. So you can actually see how certain journalists, we've got Ferial Hafaji over here, how they become targeted. And it's really gruesome and ugly. You know, it's one thing being told you're going to be shot at. It's another thing seeing your face superimposed on the body of a dog on Twitter for tens of thousands of people to see. And then we've got the curious case of Savino Hendricks, also known as Queenie. Now, I'm going to call Savino Hendricks Queenie now, not because of any form of disrespect, because that's how I referred to them, even when talking to them. So Savino once claimed, that was around 2016, that Thuli Madonsela, our former public protector of South Africa, she was in that position at the time, was the target of a hit. And she claimed that a gang boss was basically behind this hit, okay? The journalists who reported on that, though, for the Sunday Times were 2 of the journalists who wrote the SARS Rogue Unit stories. So that brought into question whether Queenie was perhaps sort of manipulated or puppeteered by rogue state agents. the thing here is that Tuli Madonsela, and you can check the Sunday Times article from 2016, she was worried. She took the threat seriously. And she said Queenie had it. She didn't name Queenie, but she said this whistleblower, she actually called Queenie a whistleblower, had given her legitimate information in the past. So how can we expect her not to take this seriously? And that's another key thing. Not to say it is this case in this specific instance, but we have people who peddle legitimate information and then they sort of start slipping in the lies. So once they've gained your trust, or they think they've gained your trust, then they start hitting you with nonsense. So you really have to be on your toes all the time. So Queenie spent time in jail. I met her in 2016. It was a very weird meeting. It was probably one of the more surreal moments of a very long career, like in 20 years. She admitted to being involved in gangs. She also admitted to threatening a former public protector, Lawrence Mushwana. I found this out through extreme research before I met her in 2016, and I asked her about that. And she said, yes, I did. I threatened him by phone. It was a bomb threat. So now we've got someone who's popping up repeatedly with public protectors of South Africa. The Sunday Times journalists surely would have figured that out by then. Be that as it may, maybe they did and there wasn't space. I don't know, space for publishing the information, but it was very weird. Queenie claimed lots of things, including that she threatened Lawrence Mushwana, the former public protector, because he did not want to listen to information she had, and she said that information would have saved the life of Hazel Crane. Hazel Crane, I'm looking at the younger folks. Hazel Crane was murdered in Johannesburg in 2003. She was super well known, like a socialite. She was friends with Winnie Madikizela. So Queenie was basically saying, I had the information that could have prevented this massive, sort of riveting murder reported on extensively. And that's why she threatened Lawrence Mushwana. She also claimed that a police officer, and I'll loop back. She claimed a police officer, now former police officer, Jeremy Very, was working with a gang boss. Jeremy Very then claimed Queenie was part of a smear campaign against him, being run by a DA politician at the time. So it's very messy. Anyway, I reported on some of those things, and boom, Queenie was not a fan of mine. In 2018, she posted this on Facebook. Plato paid me to do a lot of things. Yes, Madalil had to watch at her house. A journo, Karen Dolly, was paid the same day 48,000 to write. Not the first time. I'm not quite sure what this message actually means. We assume she means I was paid 48,000 Rand to write something. I wasn't, but that's how it goes. And then sadly, Queenie was murdered on the 13th of January, 2025 in Worcester. She was shot dead while I was creating this presentation. And the weird thing is that I'd included Queenie in this presentation because I'd prepped. I was working on it for a while and she was murdered. So you can see there's a fatal edge. I'm not saying a murder was linked to misinformation or disinformation, but these are very messy, sticky, overlapping organized crime webs. So we've got gangs, we've got politics, we've got violence here. And that's where you all fit in. So after writing about Queenie's murder for the Daily Maverick, we had an article. I was accused on Facebook, social media, of effectively continuing a smear campaign by defending those Queenie made claims against. So I'm not entertaining this, and which is why I've taken the name out. We don't care about that. I just want to show you how the cycle consistently continues. It's almost heartbreaking. You can see this person said, then I read the article written for the Daily Maverick newspaper. I could taste and feel the underlying tone and emotion negative, a clear discredit, using the murder of the individual to yet again defend others against allegations. Now, if you read the article, I'm merely stating what happened. I'm actually not taking a side. And then this person actually used the advert for this talk on social media. And that's how you fit into this weird smear campaign mess. We are part of this as I talk now. That is still up on Facebook. And it actually, on a very personal side, it made me a little nervous because this person, Queenie, was murdered. She has said she's been involved in gangs. I don't know if someone was controlling her. And my biggest fear today was if this person is serious, are we going to have problems here? So that always leaves me a bit ugly. But let's excavate the roots of smear campaigns in South Africa. We know they're nothing new. We know that under apartheid, Stratcom was very real. It was a very real thing. If you read Paul Erasmus's books, Confessions of a Stratcom Hitman, you will be depressed. It's very like, yo. And also like you'll be horrified at how juvenile some of it was. Like there's a part in the book where he says they break into apartheid either cops or intel agents, whatever. They break into houses and they switch a lady's birth control for an inert pill and then like be gleeful about it. What? Anyway. So this focuses on my book, Man Alone. Okay. So this is where the sort of heart of the book is. In 1996, Nelson Mandela signed off on the Presidential Investigation Task Unit to investigate, among other allegations, Vito Palazzolo. This is him over here. At the time, he was allegedly or suspected of being a top mafia member from Italy. Okay, and he was based in the Western Cape. So this investigative unit was meant to look into Vito Palazzolo and his possible links to the underworld and the South African Police Service. Now, I'm standing here and I'm telling you this was 1996, and we still have the same theme recurring of crime suspects being looked at for their relationships with police officers. This is a problem. Anyway, aside from Vito Palazzolo, this investigative unit also took over a stagnant investigation into an alleged plot to assassinate Nelson Mandela at his 1994 inauguration. Okay, which is scary. I mean, what on earth? So I just wanted to show you, I thought this is pretty special. On the one side, we have Vito Palazzolo. On the other side, that is Nelson Mandela's actual handwriting. It was contained in a letter. This is the letter he wrote in cursive, which is basically setting out the formation of the Presidential Investigation Task Unit. It comes from court documents. It was used in court. We'll find out why now. So here we go. Andre Lincoln was appointed to head the Presidential Investigation Task Unit. And I wanted to include this photograph because I don't think it's been widely seen at all. Andre Lincoln supplied it, and I have checked with him it's okay to use in presentations, etc. And he said it was. But just to give you some idea of who he was, the arrow is pointing to him. And on the opposite side of the table, we've got Anwar Dramat, we've got Chris Hani, and we've got Peter Jacobs. So Anwar Dramat was head of the Hawks, and there's a whole story, a sub-story there. Please do research it. Chris Hani, we know what happened to him, assassinated, terrible. Peter Jacobs used to be head of crime intelligence, and he was kicked out of that position, or he was transferred, whichever way you want to look at it. So they were eating a meal. Okay, so Andre Lincoln insists the Nelson Mandela assassination plot was legitimate. Okay. He was among those who was investigating it. And he insists that a sniper rifle was found under a senior policeman's desk at the police head office around 1996. Okay. So is that not terrifying if true? Because it means South Africa in 1996, when we were still extremely politically raw, we could have been flipped right back into a war zone. So anyway, Andre Lincoln says this murder plot existed. He says this up until today. Please read Man Alone. Your mind will be blown and your heart will be a little broken. But yeah. Democratic South Africa's first National Police Commissioner, George Fivers, rubbished the sniper rifle information, okay? Now, George Fivers went on and he set up a private investigations firm, and it's kind of cropped up in the news here and there. It's come up more recently, by that I mean about last year or the year before, with ESCOM. So he's still kind of in the game, involved in things. And it's up to you who to believe here, and that's the infuriating thing about smear campaigns and disinformation. We don't know what to believe. But if this turns out to be true, if what Andre Lincoln says is true, it means that Nelson Mandela's would-be killers have potentially lived around us. They could still be living around us. The people that could have severed South Africa's democracy, very young democracy, were allowed to be. They were allowed to go on with their lives, if that's true. So what happened to Andre Lincoln, right? While heading the Presidential Investigative Task Unit, he was criminally charged. He was basically accused of, among other things, working with Vito Palazzolo, the suspected mafioso at the time. He was convicted of several charges and he was kicked out the South African Police Service. So his career basically ended. He countered, though, and we're talking 1996, he countered that apartheid-era cops framed him because of where his investigations were leading, which was back to the state. Okay. So basically, Andre Lincoln fought on. He appealed the court findings that he was guilty. He was cleared, and he was later reabsorbed into the police service. He maintains that the Presidential Investigative Task Unit set up by Nelson Mandela was the very first victim of state capture in democratic South Africa. And we're talking about 1996, which means when did state capture actually start, right? When did the capture of South Africa ever really end, and when did it truly start? So Andre Lincoln to this day says he has paid and is paying a hefty price for basically blowing the whistle on crime internally of the police service. There are many other people saying, no, he was the criminal. And again, I'm just going to punt Daily Maverick and the YouTube videos, but if you want to hear General Lincoln directly, if you want to hear his version, his story, his words, we do have a video up. And as you can see there, it says, I've spent my career fighting for my survival. What have I done that's made some people so full of hatred? So, yeah. So we know that disinformation is designed to conceal organized crime, okay? Not always, but more often than not. And the truth of organized crime is often in the form of a murder toll. And the reason I say that is because in organized crime, there are so many stories intentionally planted about one thing that it's so difficult to know what happened. So often the way I work is if someone has been murdered, the only fact is the person has been murdered. Everything else has to be sieved through and through and through again to try and catch the lie, try and catch the lie, try and catch the lie. It's scary because I can't imagine what it is like to be a younger journalist stepping into this, and you wouldn't necessarily know what you're stepping into. You wouldn't necessarily know there's a lie to catch. So this is another semi-recent, it feels like ages ago, and it's just last month still, but yeah. So Mark Liffman, the murder accused businessman from Cape Town, Sea Point specifically, was fatally shot on the 3rd of November 2024 in the Western Cape Town of George. Now, it's got lost in all that's happened because there's a lot happening in Cape Town. There's always a lot happening in Cape Town. But he pushed the SARS rogue unit agenda. So he basically pushed the idea that there was a rogue unit in the South African Revenue Service, which we now know was a narrative that was intentionally fed to implode SARS. Mark Liffman was under investigation by SARS. So here's the thing. I don't know, and perhaps someone else does. I don't know if anyone will ever come forward and say this, but I don't know if Mark Liffman was fed the rogue unit idea and he just regurgitated it back out, or if he was perhaps used to push out that agenda. We don't know. So here's the interesting thing. About 2 weeks before his murder, I started getting weird phone calls and people trying to get hold of me, people wanting to know my details. If you're phoning me on my cell phone, surely you've got my details. If you Google my name, you can see I work at Daily Maverick. And it showed up on Truecaller, which is an app which kind of tries to identify who's calling you. It would show up as debt collection or private investigation, it was creepy. But anyway, eventually someone got my home address, which is quite easy to get. So I don't know why they went through all that hoo-ha. I can teach them a thing or two, or I should become a debt collector. I'm joking, with muscle. Yeah, like 2 weeks before his murder, I think, a week or possibly a week, the sheriff of the court arrived at my personal home and handed me a letter of demand on behalf of Mark Liffman and his lawyers. And if you've read my books, or if you've read anything I've written, you may have inevitably read something I've written about Mark Liffman. Not that I've got an agenda against him, but because the state has taken lots of action against him, from SARS to the police SAPs to, He was allegedly involved in several crimes. So what he basically accused me of in that document is that, when I read from his lawyers, it is our instruction that our client has been the receiving end of a campaign of defamatory publications geared towards bringing our client into disrepute, authored by you, extending over the period of the last 10 years. The mic got a fright. Okay, it's back. Oh, that was scary. So the mic, shame, it's feeling it with me. This was terrifying. I did not run a discrediting campaign against anyone. I don't have the time. And if you look at what I've written about many people extensively over longer than 10 years. So anyway, that was a bit weird. And I found out afterwards that a letter of demand is something that can basically be emailed to you and can be emailed to your work. So the fact that it was sent to my house, my personal address, makes me feel like it was a bit intimidation-y, allegedly. But anyway, Mark Liffman was linked to various industries, including private security. And you'll know I've said this before, but elements of private security, especially in the Western Cape, where we've got a high number of gangsterism and gangs, those elements have turned inside out. So what is sold to us as security may not necessarily be security. And I would go so far as to argue that is another form of disinformation. We are led to believe this person is here to make sure I'm safe, when in fact that person may work for a gang suspect. And these are worries. I'm not mentioning a specific company here. I am speaking very broadly. We do know that 2 individuals with links to PPA security have been arrested in connection with Mark Liffman's murder. The company has made it very clear they're cooperating with cops. So, and this is where Gun Free South Africa, they've got a booth outside. Please go take a look. They do very important work, especially in the realm of gangs and guns. So, same person, Andre Lincoln, who we discussed earlier, who headed the Presidential Investigative Task Unit in nearly said 2016, but 1996, was kicked out the police service, had to fight his way back in, etc., etc. He did get back into the police service. Not only did he get back into the police service, he was promoted. So in 2018, he was appointed to head the anti-gang unit, which we can only imagine the dangers associated with the job, given that we are in South Africa's gangsterism capital and given the number of suspicions, complaints, accusations, and allegations of police officers working with gangsters. Okay, so I don't know the type of person that would take on that job. Adele called me brave. This is a whole different ballgame here. So the anti-gang unit at its launch, and there are traces of the launch online, media reports, etc. It was sold to the public as this sharp and strong muscle, like a clout of a thing that's going to crack down on gangsterism. Cyril Ramaphosa was there. There was an air unit thingy. There were like helicopters. There were boots on the ground, cops in the air. It was huge. It was misleading. The Independent Investigative Directorate, Independent Police Investigative Directorate, the police watchdog, IPID, subsequently found that the anti-gang unit was under-resourced. It didn't have enough capacity. It's heartbreaking because you look at this and you think, was this unit not sort of fed to the wolves? And I punt my other book, To the Wolves now. I didn't know I was going to say that, but To the Wolves. And like the infuriating thing about this is, if this was sold to the public, how the hell can you do something like this and tell people who are trying to survive bullets nearly every day, who are seeing people dying, seeing people get shot, who are seeing people's lives getting taken away, that it's cool, we got you, we don't got you. And that's why I really want to point out that this, to me, is a warped, like the ugliest type of, not even disinformation, it's no information. The public was misled about this. There's no doubt about that. And it's heartbreaking because it really brings into question what the state thinks about certain residents. I slipped the slide in towards the start of this talk. I actually did have a full slide on this before the JP Smith raid. but I decided to swap it out. But I'm glad I slipped it back in, because what Adele was speaking about earlier is the guns to gangs scandal. And that again fits into that. I'm not sure if it's disinformation, but there's something wrong here, and it links to information. So Project Impi, or Operation Impi, was basically looking into how police officers were involved in smuggling firearms to gangsters in the Western Cape. Okay. And that investigation imploded in 2016 because two of the key investigators were moved off it. And what those investigators found, I think it was something like 1,666 murders and attempted murders with Project Impi identified firearms. And I may have the figure slightly off, excuse me, but 361 children were murdered or maimed with those firearms. And still to date, I haven't seen anything put forward to the public by the state, aside from what's come out in court papers. So again, this really leaves me nauseous at the fact that there's something wrong here. There's an information block, a critical information block. I think if more people knew about this and you saw something, or you saw something happening, you may want to speak out about it, because you know that this is where the problem is within the state when it comes to this. There are lots more gun scandals, by the way, with the South African Police Service and private security companies. And it's scary because what we think of as our protection can be anything but. So is there such a thing as decent disinformation? Okay, does it exist? I've spoken to international journalists recently, and they were like, no, disinformation is just bad. So I'm going to show you an example here. So in 2013, news emerged that a woman whose kidnapping and rape was organized by Hard Living's gang boss Rashid Staghi was fatally shot in Manenberg. This is actually a story I wrote for the Cape Times in 2013 about that. I interviewed Chantal Knight's mother. That was the lady who was murdered. Her name was Chantal Knight. I interviewed her mom, and I'll never forget, I was standing here and her mom was standing here talking to me about what's been happening, and there was a bullet hole in the window behind her because her house had been shot into. And I also won't forget that when the photographer parked the car outside, we were warned that we were on Americans' Hard Living's turf, like on the line, and we should be careful. So it was a horrible story. This lady was grieving her daughter's murder, but plot twist. Enter Jeremy Very. He was actually one of the police officers who worked on Project Impi. Turns out that Chantal Knight was actually alive. And Jeremy Very had spread that, I want to say disinformation. It is disinformation. The reason he gave to media was, I exploited the fact that the Hard Livings thought they had gotten rid of her. I'm responsible for the life of a person. I will do whatever is necessary to ensure their safety. So if we look at it from his view and based on these words, he intentionally spread nonsense, disinformation to ensure someone's life was safe. Yeah. Chantal Knight wasn't murdered, actually. And I'm not sure where she is today, but it's quite a tale, and it seems to have just sort of slipped through the radar. So we are definitely living in the age of fake news. Social media and artificial intelligence, AI, are proliferating it. So it's exhausting to me as a journalist, because sometimes I'll flip through TikTok. It's actually a very useful resource for a journalist. You find a lot out about people on there. But I'll flip through it and I'll say, oh, and I'll listen to this thing. And people, what they do is they just take your entire story off Daily Maverick and they don't credit anything. They just use it for their own stuff, which if it were in print, it would be plagiarism. I'm not sure what this is, but anyway, that's just my gripe. This is a lot more dangerous and scary than just my gripe. So this is X, we call it Twitter. That's how old I am. But this is X, formerly known as Twitter, the app, okay? And I screen grabbed a tweet here of Elon Musk's saying, X is the future. It's citizen journalism. So he's retweeting that or re-Xing that. And Elon Musk, in his own words, is saying, you are the media now. Okay. So now built into X is an artificial intelligent little platform called Grok. Because I'm from Cape Town, I'm very inclined to want to say Grok because it just sounds gross, but let's just go with Grok. So I'm not even sure how to say it. But anyway, so there's this little built-in function on Grok, and you can ask it questions. So you can see over here, I asked Grok, who is the biggest spreader of disinformation on X? And now this is the very platform that Elon Musk launched. So it's his own platform, basically, on his own platform. And the answer was X, formerly known as Twitter, has been identified as the platform with the highest prevalence of disinformation. Okay. And then if you go further down, individual influence posts on X have suggested that Elon Musk might be, and it goes on to say, the biggest spreader of misinformation. But no, I didn't. Just to be very clear, I saw someone else did something similar, so I wanted to try it for myself, and I was like, no, because I thought this was fake news. I did not know you could actually do that. So this is the problem we're sitting with. We're using, or we are promoting things on a platform that is absolutely known for disinformation, and its own AI Grok says it's known for disinformation. Me as a journalist, this is what we're up against. This is a story. So I've looped it into the Nelson Mandela assassination plot. I was in a queue in Milnerton to upgrade, get my car license, my driver's license. And I always get scared for the eye test for reasons of my own. And I didn't know how to spend the time. It was a long queue. And I was nervous because I wanted to work on this. So I did. It took literally 5 seconds on an AI platform. I just typed in breaking news, Mandela assassinated, inauguration. And this easy peasy AI website churned out a full-on story. This is a fragment of the story. We're talking like an 800-word news article, which was kind of word perfect. And it quoted different people. It quoted a police source. It quoted a friend of Mandela's. This is what we're up against. As a journalist, this gives me extreme anxiety, not because I'm scared my job's going to be taken away. I'll land on my feet, but this is how easy it is to pump nonsense out, but nonsense that looks very real. So I don't know how many of you know about deep fakes. My man over there knows these deep fakes. I'm teasing. But so deep fakes are when you digitally manipulate a video or photograph or voice clip to sound, so it makes it look like you're doing something in a video or something. So sorry. Deepfakes are a problem. This is used in South Africa. We had Patrice Motsepe was recently, I'm going to say deep-faked. So a video did the rounds of him saying, like, invest with me, you'll make millions. Leanne Manners. Internationally, this is huge. Maria Ressa, the editor of Rappler, she's been the victim of a deepfake or deepfakes. And then there's like a weird side cottage industry of deepfakery. Like there's a whole Tom Cruise TikTok account where someone's making money off being a Tom Cruise deepfake. But this is where, that's like the fun side of it. The scary side of it is that this can be used very dangerously against journalists. It's very easy to do this. So you can make it look like I'm doing something I haven't. So my parents are in the audience tonight, and they don't know this, but one of the things that happened to me through looking into organized crime, someone once phoned me and they were like, this video of you is doing the rounds. And I'm like, of what? And they're like, of you in an intimate situation with Ernie Lustig, the gangster who was murdered. I know that the video doesn't exist, but my first thought was a deep fake. And how do I control that? There's no way to control it. So I just wanted to show you over here to lighten the mood. This is Deepfake Maker. I found some random website and I wanted to show you how easy it is to. I love the Golden Girls, people. I know we are now swinging wildly between topics. I love the Golden Girls. Blanche is my favorite character. So what I've done here is used a deepfake website with an AI platform and superimposed my face onto Blanche Devereaux. And that it took literally about, I think it took longer for me to actually find a photograph of myself than it took to do this. It flips it very quickly. So, sorry, I'm like so impressed with myself for this. I hope. Yes, there we go. Thank you. So I hope my parents or someone took a picture of this because I'm never going to be Blanche Devereaux in a deep fake thing again. But yeah. The scary side, people, is that South Africa knows disinformation discriminates. It ravages lives. It derails careers. It sparks violence. I think the attempted insurrection 2021. It scrolls over history. Okay? If you read Man Alone, what Andre Lincoln, the former cop, argues is that the history we know today is not accurate, which means that I would argue that our existences, our truths have been misappropriated, and that's what we have to fight for. So we know all this. By the way, General Lincoln has been through a lot. His colleague, Shalkanier, was murdered. He was accused of X, Y, and Z. He is accused of X, Y, and Z. I just want to say the physical toll, because we always think grand things, ESCOM, this and that. He has had a heart transplant and he's a double amputee, legs below the knees. This affects and impacts people in ways that we really can't tell. So we know that this is the case with South Africa. We know disinformation is rife. It has been rife. It still is rife, apparently, if we listen to J.P. Smith. And that's been the case without technology as advanced as it is now. Now, deepfakes are used overseas or internationally. It's scary to think what can be done in South Africa. So I'm going to close off with a quote. And I've told David, if he's still in the audience, who kind of just, there we go, my one eye. That's why I was scared for the eye test. But I told him that Man Alone really broke my heart. I think it was heartbreaking, but not in a bad way, but just to learn how bad people can be, even as a hardened crime journalist. It's terrible. I'll leave you with this. If South Africa doesn't break out of the spin cycle of a situation that it's been looped in for decades, those patches of a much broader story may retrospectively only, when stitched together, show yet another chapter of this country's capture or attempted capture. And what I really want to say is that disinformation often only becomes apparent in retrospect. Once the damage has been done, once the country has been ravaged, once someone's health has been gutted. And this is serious. This is a global problem. I know I've focused on South Africa, but I want to give you a piece of what I know, what I've been through. But this is a serious problem. And with that, there's so much skullduggery in South Africa, enough to have 4 books published over 5 years. Teasing. And please help us journalists, support the people on the side of good, not just journalists. And please, please, please read and support Daily Maverick. And with that, I thank you. That was my Blanche Devereaux. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to check if anyone has any questions, please. We've got 10 minutes. I can waffle on. I don't think you want to hear me waffling on. If no one has questions, I'm going to put someone in the spotlight. I'm teasing. Thank you.
Testing. Okay. Talking about Hani, Janusz Valush, or whatever, however he says that, he's safely in Poland, and he did that story on ETV. I didn't actually watch it, so I have no grounds to ask you this question. But what do you think was the real story there? I mean, because he's in Poland, he was safe to come out. So what do you think?
So I'm just going to take this juncture to point out that I'm only turning 40 this year. So I don't have much first-hand knowledge, but I can actually answer. I don't know what to think, which is the point of smear campaigns, etc. And through my work, I have heard different people saying different things, that it wasn't just him. There were definitely other people. The thing is, can I trust the people saying it? Because why would you say it to a journalist, A, with no proof, and B, this is it's critical murder. Why come to a journalist and sort of slip the info without any proof? I wish I could answer you better, but I'm only 39. But thank you. Oh, sorry. That's the eye.
Yeah. One point about the infamous and Canada fire pool, no journalist spotted, and that is no African of Zuma's generation ever had a childhood opportunity to learn how to swim or be in a pool. So it strikes me as unlikely and extreme that Zuma would have ordered the architect to build a swimming pool in. It's just how the architect inflated whatever plans he had to suck more money out of the state. You know, somebody of Zuma's generation, braaiing and boozing is how they relax and entertain themselves, not a swimming pool.
Thank you.
I wonder what you suggest could be done, considering that it's a global phenomenon, and of course, very much a South African one. What can be done in South Africa to make what you think should be done in South Africa to just go to start some kind of, if not control, but some kind of regulation or some kind of, bring them to task?
Oh, thank you for that. Like, I'm going to be a little selfish here. Actually, not selfish, but I'm just going to say it's so difficult to control what is out of your control. So, for example, with X, that is not something South Africa can control. So we're going to rely on something to become self-reliant, to filter out disinformation and misinformation. Please invest in proper, solid journalism. And I mean that broadly, please. We are struggling. We are small newsrooms. You sit up for hours, you give your life to it, and it's still shrinking, and the disinformation is growing. So I know it sounds very self-thingy. Oh no, I'm an author, I need the word. But it sounds self-absorbed to say, please help proper, thorough journalism. But I genuinely mean that, please, if you can invest in it in any way, if you can support us, please do. Yeah. That was from the heart. It was a bit selfish.
Hi, Karen. Thanks. It's so nice to come to your lectures. It really shifts where my thinking. I've been watching this JP Smith thing, and I don't know if there's any truth at all in it or how that works. But over the last couple of years, has he made any inroads into the construction mafia? Because wasn't that turning a corner? So does that play into this at all?
So it's difficult to answer that, because when the city puts out a statement about the positive it's doing, and I'm not detracting from that, that is positive. But at the same time, we know that the former Human Settlements, MMC, Malusi Boy, was arrested, not to say he's guilty. He's facing criminal charges. He hasn't had a chance to plead yet. So it's really difficult to gauge what is being done versus what is not going right, because we just don't know what's not going right. In terms of the authenticity or the reasons behind the raid, I'm sure that will become apparent. I have written for Daily Maverick, sorry, that the initial drive behind the investigation, which sort of branched out, was crime fighting. Now, whether that investigation sort of got sort of swished aside by politics or something, I can't answer. And I think the saddest part about this is that, again, someone is in the wrong. So whatever happens, we are still getting, not second best, we're getting the worst. We're worst off here.
Lost.
Can you get a bit closer to your mouth, please? Thank you.
Is that better?
I can hear you.
All right. One thing that, okay, thank you. One thing that's critical in audiobooks is the relationship between the cops. You had the photograph of Chris Hani and some of those cops there. In your last book, I began to question, and I would like to hear your opinion about it, that cohesive unit and that unity amongst those former liberation cops that investigated MP. Do you think that that unity amongst them has been shattered with the Charles Kinnear investigation? I'd really like to hear your comments about that. because one gets the sense there's something nasty coming. So thanks.
Yes, again, it's really difficult to gauge. And I feel like I'd answer differently on different days and also based on what's in the news. I do feel that, and more broadly speaking, there's a lot more fragmentation that is becoming apparent. Whether that's going to show fragmentation in specific groups of individuals, for example, in the book, I don't know. It's super confusing. And I think this is what gets me. As soon as I think one thing, I'm inclined to think the other. And then I think one thing and I think the other. And I would hate for this to be a situation where we say the truth is in the murder toll. You've brought up Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear and everything around that, the theories of who did what, X, Y, and Z. We're talking about disinformation and smear campaigns. For me, the truth is there. This man was murdered. The why, where, how, what. I think once we see the evidence, we will see, or I don't know, we'll be able to solidify the idea that there is indeed fragmentation. The other thing I just want to point out about this book is that I've never written about, I've never looked so intensely into intelligence, counterintelligence, spy work, etc. I have, I can honestly say that I would be such a bad spy, but it's very difficult to figure out what is legitimately put forward and what isn't. And that's why Man Alone relies heavily on what has been said and what has been said against that. So horrifically, it's claims and counterclaims. And that's why I would love to find out what you think about that, which you've kind of addressed a little. But yeah, in fact, there's a quote in Man Alone, and perhaps that's how I should answer you, because that's what I basically extrapolated from everything. And I quote a former police officer: "There is no trust in intelligence. There are only converging interests." Thank you. Those are not my words. I'm not that eloquent. But yeah, and I hope I've answered you. Thank you. Anyone else? There's a man in the audience, a young man there in a light t-shirt. Sorry, folks, my dad is here. He used to be a lecturer. He's never going to get the chance to attend a lecture of mine again. I just had to put him on the spot. But we can finish if you like. He's very shy. Cool.
Yeah, okay, cool. Karen, what do you envision is what does the next 4 years look like in the United States of America, where there are now no fact checkers on Meta? Most of the news is behind a paywall, which people aren't going to pay for. What does it look like with disinformation being able to spread as widely and quickly as that, and the truth not being readily available, like Daily Mavericks News, which is free and accessible for everyone who wants to read it?
So my immediate answer would be no, just no. But my serious answer is, you know what is it going to look like? That's terrifying, because children are going to be growing up in front of phones, in front of screens. And how do we expect children to discern between fact and fiction? So they're going to be learning complete nonsense. And we can see it. You can see it on X already. There's complete nonsense, and it's scary nonsense on TikTok. I don't know how many of you are on TikTok. They are like health remedies and things, and you're like, no, don't do. You know that's not good for your body. Now, and you can see everything has become hyper artificial, processed, from food to music to entertainment to what's put in front of us. It's a very scary world we're facing. I feel very old saying this, but it's a very scary world we're facing. And it's almost like, if you compare it to if disinformation, if nonsense was took, we can't predict what future generations. So if your mom took while she's pregnant, we did not know how to predict how that child would be. And I feel like that's what we're sitting with now, but it cannot be good. It is doom and gloom. Sorry, but it's scary. It's a very serious thing. It's very scary. And I don't even want to think what it's going to be like. I think the dumbing down of society has been happening, and it's just going to escalate much faster. Hopefully, and there's always hope, hopefully there will be a counter against that. Hopefully there will be sort of a de-acceleration towards reality and what actual health is, which isn't smearing stuff on your face. Let's drink water, people, eat your veggies, go walk out if you can, exercise. Here we go, boom. That's me being an influencer. But with that, if there are no other questions, that is the extent of it. Thank you all for making the time to be here.